Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Rare Together, the podcast series from LDA Research that explores what it's really like to live with a rare disease. As usual, I'm your host, Andrew Grant, and today we just have one guest. So I'd like you to introduce you straight away to Hannah, who comes from Mülheim An Der Ruh in Germany. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Hi, Hannah. How are you today?
Really good considering the circumstances.
Right. And that's the circumstances of what we're going to be talking about. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Some of these things have been absolutely fascinating. I'm sure we're going to have a great discussion today. So what would be fantastic if you wouldn't mind, Hannah? Can you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your home situation, what you do, and then tell us about the condition that you suffer from, please?
I'm 23 years old. I just turned 23 on the 22nd. And I live in the same house as my grandparents, and I work as a computer scientist, but I'm doing an apprenticeship there. So I still have a little bit of time before I finish that. And my rare disease is called FLNA Deficiency, which comes from the Filamin A. I'm also not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is one out of three proteins that are responsible for muscle and connective tissue building in your body, which basically means that I cannot build this filamin and I cannot process it in my body, which leads to that my muscles are slowly deteriorating, in the sense that the more I use my muscles, the more they deteriorate, because when they actually want to be building up, they can't find the protein, so instead they break down. And also it affects my connective tissue, so my joints are really hypermobile. I have really trouble with walking. I currently walk on crutches, but for longer distance, I use a wheelchair to get around, an electric one, because also my arms don't have the strength to wheel me very far. Right. And since it involves all of the muscles and involves all of my organs, all of the different kinds of ways.
Wow. Okay. So how long have you, how did this start and how long have you been suffering from it?
So I've probably had this my whole life, but it only really came out about 2 years ago when my knees started dislocating more frequently. In my childhood, that happened about every 6 months. And I really thought that was normal, that you just pop your joint back in and go about your day.
Right.
Then it started happening more often, and I noticed that I'd had more difficulty standing, a lot of nausea. I couldn't eat a lot of foods. And I was that cannot be normal or right. And then I had to change doctors a few times because some just said, it's normal. Maybe you're having your period. That's just, eat healthier and that's going to go away. Until I found a doctor who was ready to test me for originally Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And in this whole panel for the connective tissue disorders, this FLNA deficiency is also part of it. And that came out into the open. Sadly, the doctor then did not really believe in treating it. So I had to switch doctors again to get a doctor who was willing to treat it. So for 2 years, I've actually had, the symptoms and the documentation to get treatment.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting. So when you say he didn't believe in treating it, what did he say to you?
So actually, it was a female doctor, and at that point, I had a physical therapist who prescribed me crutches so I can kind of walk longer. I always say the crutches are an energy saving thing, because if I don't use my crutches at 12 and noon, I will basically not be able to walk anymore. Okay. I can walk without crutches, but if I use them, I can walk the whole day a little bit. But otherwise, at some point, I can't walk at all. And I came to her with the crutches, and she said, no, I shouldn't use those. They will not good for my posture. And I was originally also then asking about a wheelchair, which is also about 1.5 years ago. And she was like, oh no, that's also not good for your posture. And she said I should do water aerobics, and that will fix everything. And just, I do that and then I'm cured. Okay. And that's why I was skeptical, because I was like a genetic disease, and she was basically telling me I can cure genetics with water gymnastics. Right. And she was also really not taking seriously my other concerns I had about my nausea and stuff. She did one test and came back normal, and then she was like, oh no, that has to be normal. So she said there's no other way to treat it than, just do the water aerobics and then it should be healed. And I didn't believe that.
Right. Okay. It's like she's, putting the shutters down, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
really. So, is it? I don't know what it's like in Germany. Is it difficult to change doctors? Was that a difficult thing to do?
Well, it always depends. Changing doctors themselves, it's easy, but finding a doctor that has the capacity to take you on can be challenging because a lot of doctors are already, I think a lot of my doctors before that were just really stressed out, and that's why they didn't really take me seriously or did more testing because they were basically like so full and stressed out. But then you can change doctors, I think once in quarter a year. There's like definitely a limit, but it usually is not like too hard
Right.
to
Okay.
change doctors. The trouble is then more, getting someone and then you have to tell your whole health history again. Then you
Yeah.
have to see if they believe in like in treating your disease. And then you always, when you like switch doctors, you have to start from scratch again.
Right. Okay. And sorry, are we talking about a general practitioner or are we talking about a specialist here?
And that's now a general practitioner. With
Okay.
specialists, it's like in America that they have teams of doctors, so they kind of like talking about my care team or something like that. It's not really like that. You have like your general practitioner, and he writes you referrals for all kinds of specialists,
Okay.
and then you have to do your specialist. But they only do one procedure or one test, and then they send like the results back to your general practitioner, and then he decides what to do with it. So
Right.
um, unless you have like really like a proven disease that the specialist can continue to treat, they usually just refer you for a test or just getting an opinion from them. But it usually always then comes back to the general
Right. Okay.
practitioner.
I certainly understand what you mean. So your new doctor, your new general practitioner, what did he do that was different for you?
So he kind of listened to my ideas. Went to the doctor, and I had an idea that was like maybe unusual because there's no really guideline how to treat this disease because it can present in so many different ways and in so many different like severities.
Yep.
So there's no do this and then do that. So a lot of doctors were like, "Oh, I'm not sure to do this. What if it goes bad or something?" Like you're scared of liability. And he just listened and said, "Okay, you want to try, I don't know, getting a wheelchair? Okay, then talk to the people who do wheelchairs and let me know what I need to put on here for you to
Okay.
get the wheelchair you need." He's like actually willing to try things out with me because a lot of with these diseases, then just you can't say this treatment is definitely going to work. You have to just try it out and then see. And a
Right.
lot of doctors before were not willing to do that, and he was actually willing to do that.
Okay. Okay. Understood. So, are you taking medication for the disease? Is there a medication available?
There's no medication treating like the cause of it.
Right.
There's like medication you can take, for example, for muscle pain and the muscles are deteriorating, but there's like only symptomatic medication, so you can treat your symptoms, but not like the root cause of the disease.
Yeah. Right. Okay. You said at the beginning, you said the more you use your muscle, the worse it gets. So talk to me a little bit more about that. Does that mean that you get worried about moving?
Yeah, a bit. You have to find this kind of balance between using your muscles enough to keep them active so that they're not deteriorating because they're not being used, and overexerting them. So I'm sometimes worried about it when I'm out with my crutches and I like do a lot that day, or if I like clean my apartment, for example, and I go a lot like back and forth. Then I get a bit worried about it, but I also know that there's no way for me of knowing at what point my muscles are going to start deteriorating. So there's not much I can do about it.
Right.
I can't say I'm stopping now and then they won't deteriorate.
I mean, yes. So, what is the kind of prognosis? Is it that you simply expect that your muscles will continue to deteriorate and it may get worse, or is there a balance point?
Hmm, not really. There are like about I think someone once said to me like 30 cases in Europe and 100 worldwide.
Wow.
So there is no experience with that at all. I'm like personally expecting them to continue deteriorating because it made sense like at the point where I was like in my 20s and the symptoms started. I use like my muscles in like a normal way all my life. And if they were deteriorating all my life, I don't see a reason why they would really stop. I can maybe slow down the process by using my wheelchair and using my crutches, but there's no really way to stop it.
Mm, yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. So if you look back, let's say, a year, how much has changed for you in that year? How much deterioration have you seen in that year?
Like about a year ago, I could still do a full day, I get to work, and just I would be exhausted in the evening, but it wouldn't be too bad. And now I can't really when I go grocery shopping, I only do that with my wheelchair, for example. Now, a year ago, I would still, go in with my crutches and just, it would still kind of like be fine. It was like a bit of exhaustion, but like the crutches took a lot off that. Now I use my wheelchair for I have this kind of rule of thumb for myself. Everything that's more than like a 2-minute walk, and also things where I am not sure when I'm going to be able to sit or stand, events, for example, I use the wheelchair. And I've only gotten the wheelchair a few months ago. So that is what changed a lot. Also, a lot of new diagnostics and new ways of treating me. It's always a process because you go to the doctor and then you're like, hey, I have had the symptoms for so long. I've tried so many things, but the specialist want to start at zero with you. So you still have to go through all the treatments that you've already tried and didn't work for them to see that they really don't work. And there's a lot of new information, for example, about how it affects my intestines. That part of my intestines really are not moving or not working, and doing something about that is definitely like a new thing that kind of deteriorated in about, I think, November, December, where I noticed, it was a lot more nausea and I could barely eat. Then I went to general hospital and then a specialized hospital. They also found out that I have a SIBO, which stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. But then again, the hospital there only believed in treating the SIBO and not treating the fact that big part of my intestine were moving. They just gave me antibiotics. They were like, if you take them for 10 days, all of your problems will be gone. And I always, like people say you shouldn't Google your symptoms, but I always Google what is like in the documents I get from my doctor, because I've experienced a lot that they put stuff in there that they don't really explain to you. So I actually also like through these research and also through being in contact with, specialists for rare diseases, that actually my rare disease can be a cause for the SIBO. So even if I take now antibiotics, the chances of it coming back are pretty high. And that's something that the doctors didn't tell me. So I've also, it deteriorated a lot, but I also gained like a lot of experience on how to really find my way around doctors and the documents.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. Do you suffer from a rare disease, or do you know someone who does? If you do, I'd like to take a moment to point you in the direction of the Rare Disease Network. It's a private support group on Facebook where we bring together people with all sorts of rare diseases from all over the world. You'll find exclusive research and insights. You'll get the chance to ask questions to leading medical professionals, and you'll hear some engaging and inspirational stories from my growing community. There's a link to the group in the episode notes below. Why not click on that, and we'll see you there. You mentioned that, as you said, it's extremely rare. 30 people in Europe and 100 people worldwide. I mean, are you in touch with other sufferers?
Yeah, there is a Facebook group which is private there are about, I don't know, 70 people who have this disease, but it's also a lot of parents of kids who are, recently born and have more severe cases that, already get diagnosed at birth. And in contact with some of these people. So sometimes when I have like new medical complications, I post in the group and ask if anyone else has experienced this. Also to maybe guide my doctors in a way and be like, okay, some other people experience this, or to, talk about what treatments you can get and what others might have helped. Since there's no research, I have to do my own Facebook research.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm wondering whether being in contact with those people has been useful for you, or is it sometimes a negative experience? That's what I've heard from other people, that often a lot of people in these groups, what they focus on is all the negatives, and that you don't necessarily learn anything from that. But your experience may be different. I don't know.
Yeah, it's different because I don't put too much thought into what conversations are going on there. I post and ask them, and if I get useful information from that, that's like great. Sometimes I don't get any answer at all, and that's okay too. It's just in my case, there's a lot of parents who are desperate to get their child help. So like when I joined, I didn't expect like an environment that will also show me positives, because I knew that those are just people like me who are very frustrated because they can't get any help. So I empathize a lot with that, which then actually helps me be like, okay, I'm not alone in this. There are a lot of people out there who are frustrated. There are people out there who are trying to get help, and I can still learn from that.
Right.
Yes, it focuses on the negatives, but that is actually the focus and the information I need, because I can't, write in this group and ask about the great things about having a rare genetic disease.
Fair enough. Okay. Yes. Perhaps that's me being naive. Okay. So let's change the subject a little bit. You mentioned that you're doing an apprenticeship for computer science. So how has your condition affected that? Has it affected it at all? Has it made it more difficult, or have you chosen the right career to fit your disease, kind of thing?
It was actually a bit funny because when I applied for the apprenticeship, I did not have a diagnosis yet. And then when I started, I had a diagnosis. And so people were a bit confused about it at first, because they were, oh, we didn't know that about you. And I was like, I didn't know either when I applied. There's people that are very supportive. For example, when I went through the whole process of getting my wheelchair, you have to have a lot of talks with insurance, with the people who built the wheelchair, with people who write the prescription for the wheelchair. So every week they would ask me, so is there any news on the wheelchair? And I was like, sadly no, or maybe, yeah, but it's going forward. So that has been great. I'm luckily in a position where I can also, work from home when I'm not feeling too well. And also it was just a very welcoming environment there. And I have never had any issues there so far.
Okay, that's great. It's been positive. And so how long have you been doing this job of the apprenticeship?
For about a year and a few months.
Okay.
So I have about a year left.
And are you enjoying it? Has it been the right choice for you?
Yeah, definitely. I love working with computers. I always have. And it's just also a great workplace. You hear about a lot about, bad workplaces when you're young, and when you're like looking at like minimum wage jobs, for example, and you're thinking like, oh my gosh, is there even like a good workplace in the world? But I think I've found one that is pretty good. Like, it's not perfect, obviously, but it's pretty good.
So you say you can work from home or work at the office. How often do you go to the office?
Usually 5 days a week, because I actually really enjoy, working and conversing with the people I work with. And it's always, a bit funnier being there, especially me being an apprentice. Like when I have questions, it's easier to just turn around and be like, hi, I have this question. Can you help me? Or when you have nothing to do at the moment, just go to your neighbor and be like, what are you doing right now? Explain to me.
Right.
I do really like that. But unfortunately, like the last 2 months, I haven't been in the office much due to like health problems, but it's getting a bit better right now.
And how about traveling to work? I mean, do you have far to travel, and do you drive, or what do you do?
No, I don't have a lot of travel to work. It's not far. Like I can reach it by car in 10 minutes. The only problem with that is that your car is expensive these days. Gas is expensive. And I always say being disabled is expensive, because with my wheelchair, I have to drive to a lot of places, which means I use a lot more gas than the average person, which sometimes gets very expensive. Also with repairs, because I can't just say, oh, I will just take the bus to work, because it's like really difficult with my wheelchair. And then to do that both ways is nearly impossible. So I really rely on my car to get there.
Right. Did you have to choose your car specifically to fit the wheelchair? Was that an issue, or did you have the car?
No, but that is something that is still impressive, because I actually got my car when I turned 18, and then I got my driver's license. But back then, there was like about 2 or 3 years before my symptoms really started. So I actually have a very small car, and the wheelchair like barely fits. So I am
Okay.
also in the process of, looking for charities and stuff and government help for getting a wheelchair accessible car.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Talk about sort of home life and family life. How has your condition affected the people around you and day-to-day living?
So my mom works in the medical field, so it has not, like, she knows these things. Like, she knows how complicated it gets with doctors and stuff. So she was like, it was not like that much of a new thing for her. It was just new that her daughter had it.
Okay.
And I actually got a lot closer with my father over that because he really is supporting me with going to doctor's appointments and organizing stuff. And it's just been a bit more complicated with things like, are you just casually tell someone, oh, can you get that? And sometimes I'm having a very hard day and I'm like, I'm sorry, I cannot get the milk out of the basement or something.
Okay.
That is like
Yeah.
the main thing that has changed. Me not being able to walk long distances. I've always made it work anyway. Then I went with my car and then with my wheelchair. I adapted a lot, but other than that, life always went on for the rest of my family. I'm actually really curious what they think, how they feel, how it affected them. But
Okay.
I think it's also been difficult for them to see me get weaker. But I
Yeah.
have not really talked to them
Okay.
about that. With daily life, it actually changed a lot. I used to have, before I did my apprenticeship, I was studying at university and I used to have 3 to 4 jobs because I had just a lot of, things I like doing. For example,
Yep.
I worked at a pet hotel and I had to give up a lot of those jobs due to my illness. And I did a lot of, going places and just, doing things a lot more independently. And now I depend on people for a lot of stuff. And I spend, most of the time in my apartment because it's just a bit cozier than being outside or do something
Yeah.
like that. I also
So,
met a
so
lot of people through this whole journey. Other people who have like similar diseases like me
okay,
who I've connected with, which has been great.
that's been helpful, has it?
Yeah, definitely. Because sure, experience what has worked, what hasn't worked. And you also have someone who just understands what it's like. Because that is what sometimes been hard to communicate with my family was that when I did not feel well. And, then I had the next week a doctor's appointment. And everyone was like, oh, but you just have to hold on until next week. And then there's going to be this doctor's appointment and then everything's going to be fine. And I had a hard time communicating with them that just because I have a doctor's appointment doesn't mean anything's going to get fixed. Maybe they run some tests and they say everything's fine and send me home. And then this doesn't help. And that always really frustrated me. And that's what
Yeah.
people are sometimes having a hard time understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it's always difficult to live somebody else's experience, isn't it? You mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you said that you were at university, but obviously you're not now. Was it your condition that made you stop doing that and switch to an apprentice? Is that what you had to do?
No, it was basically COVID because when COVID started, a lot of, there were online classes and suddenly all the reasons why I went to university were not possible. Like I went there because they had great connections for doing like internships. You couldn't do
Yeah.
internships during COVID. They had great professors if they're lecturing face to face. But then basically a lot of the professors just did like a video series in 2020 and they just said basically go watch these YouTube videos I recorded of myself and then we will see each other at the exam. So all kind of everything why I went to university just fell away. And then,
Right.
COVID was starting to come to an end, but it still hadn't changed. And a lot of people were saying that a lot of people don't want to actually come back to in-person lessons. So I gave up on that also because I'm like a very practical person. Like I don't like learning theoretical things that I know that I'm never going to use. And a lot of my university studying was like theoretical work. Like we had obviously like maths and physics class, and we used it to calculate how fast a train was. And I was like, we're computer scientists. We can like maybe calculate like data and stuff.
Yeah.
How fast is my internet connection? What does that mean? But
Okay.
no, we always had these random courses where I was like, why do I need this? I had to, for one course, I had to like about 5 times describe like how an office looks like.
Right. Okay. Okay. So you needed a fresh start. I understand.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So we're coming towards the end now. I'd just like to understand a little bit about how the future for you, really. The first question is, are you aware of any medical research that's taking place that might help you in future?
Know that there's one like expert who lives in New Zealand. His name is Stephen Robertson. I am not aware if he's currently conducting research, but he has been for like the last few years. So I think there's definitely something maybe coming there. There's also some research in Germany, but it's more about like mice and genetics and not really about treatment. Because so like most research that's going to happen in the future probably is more like in like a biochemical level and not on a treatment level.
Yeah, right. Understood. Still very, very early days. And in terms of your hopes for the future for you, what do you hope about your disease?
Yeah, I hope that, people and doctors take me more seriously and that at some point that whole thing gets easier. And that maybe, right now it's, it goes from doctor to doctor, and then maybe at some point I can reach a status where I just, have the help I need and have the treatment for the symptoms and just have to continue doing that and not have a new solution for a new problem every other month.
Right. Understood completely. Well, that just about wraps it up. It's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate you sharing so openly. That's great. So for the audience, if you've enjoyed this podcast, let us know. Tell us your thoughts about what you've heard. Put a comment below, and we'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to these podcasts as well to make sure that you don't miss out. And if you know anyone else who might like to join the conversation, then let them know, share the link, etc. Also, we have a Facebook group, which is called the Rare Disease Network, and you can join in the conversation there as well. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Hannah, for your time. Really appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.